Welcome to Unashamed Unafraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming into Christ for healing.
Where we talk about real recovery stories, answer anonymous questions with experts, and share resources that actually work.
I'm your host, Steve.
And I'm your co-host, James, and we are Unashamed Unafraid.
James!
What's up, Steve?
Have you ever been more excited for an episode? You are a giddy little schoolboy.
I am totally a giddy little schoolboy. So for this episode, we have on none other than Jennifer Finlayson-Fife. So amazing.
JFF, as they say in the streets.
Yes, it is. And I'm a big fan of hers. I've listened to so much of her content and just love her perspective on so many aspects of sexuality, of choice, accountability, ownership.
Well, and I think she kind of has embodied for you, which I totally have learned from you, is like, we have to undemonize this. Like, you cannot approach recovery and sexuality with like, there is bad and good.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying like, hey, let's endorse porn or cheating on your spouse. But when we have this idea of there's don't do it and you're a good person. But if you do it, then you are a bad person.
Right. And so listening to her stuff really, to your point, helped me de-demonize it. It kind of helped me kind of unplug that shame IV that just was stuck in my arm when it came to pornography. Like it was just this intravenous thing of shame all the time around porn. She helped me kind of unplug that a little bit and was like, nope, you don't need to make this monster bigger than it really is.
Well, and that's a struggle, which I'm going to tell you kind of how we came into this episode was that's a struggle of, because so often you hear guys say, you know, there's a good guy and a bad guy in our marriage. And I, the addict, right, male or female, right, I, the addict, am the bad person. I'm in the one down. I've done the bad things. And so the best I can do is stop doing it and then spend the rest of my life paying my penance in my prison sentence as the one down in this marriage.
Right.
And that's just a paradigm that doesn't work.
Right. And she addresses that so beautifully in the episode here.
So beautifully.
Yeah. Some major truth bombs get dropped along the way. And frankly, some ownership for you and I around stuff what we can step into and own a little bit more in our own lives.
No, I mean, we probably need to like Venmo her some money, because when we got to the end, we're like, we're getting called so much into being true and owning our authentic self that James, you and I stepped into, and I'm going to give mad props. She also stepped into
I love
some of her authenticity and her struggle. And it was so much respect for that.
She full on went unashamed, unafraid with us. It just got raw and real.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, it was so cool. And we have something fun coming with this.
Yes, we do. So Jennifer Finlayson-Fife has some courses
that can be found at
finlaysonfife.com. And if you go there, she has some courses on there. And two of her most popular ones are The Art of Desire, which is a women's course, and a men's course called The Art of Loving. And Jennifer has graciously offered to
double up.
Yeah. So we offered.
We said we want a scholarship to these. We
said, can we have a scholarship to each of these? And she said, yes, and we'll match you and give you another one. So we have four scholarships to Jennifer Finlayson-Fife courses, 2 for the Art of Loving, 2 for the Art of Desire, and we will put more on that on our social media. So keep listening.
You can find those scholarships at unashamedunafraid.com/scholarships. And if you are in the mindset of knowing that you want to give back, we are a nonprofit 501c3 in which you can donate, unashamedunafraid.com/donate, get bonus content, some cool things, and that is how we pay for those scholarships. No one gets paid. Poor Jason edits all this audio for free, and all of us on the team do this for free, so we can fund more scholarships. So if you'd like to become an outsider who are bold, accepted, and unashamed, we invite you to go there. Follow us at social media at unashamedunafraid. Give us 5 stars on iTunes. That's how the world finds us, and we'll be able to find this episode and the hope that is in it. And James.
Steven.
You ready?
Let's rock and roll.
Let's jump in with JFF. Jennifer, is this real life?
Is this real life?
We're here. Can you believe this, James?
It's kind of a miracle, really. I'm a little bit starstruck, frankly. Big fan of yours, a lot of years listening to your podcasts. It's made a big difference, not only in my life, but in the lives of some of my closest friends as well. So thank you for the work that you do and for the difference that you're making in the world.
Thank you.
So we always like to let everyone introduce themselves. Because we find people are better at doing that than us totally butchering their work and what they've done. So for anyone who has lived under several rocks and does not know who you are or is familiar with your work, introduce yourself.
So I'm Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, and I am a therapist and coach and educator with a particular focus on Latter-day Saints and the particular focus of helping people create more intimate, loving, passionate marriages. So I got my PhD at Boston College, and I wrote my dissertation on LDS women and sexuality. And just perhaps because of the need for it and the presence of the internet, I've just had a natural kind of movement towards helping people, especially online through online courses and podcasting and things like that, to just help people think through the challenges that they're facing in their most important relationships. So, yeah. And then I'm married and have 3 kids. And
Sweet.
I'm currently in Savannah, Georgia on vacation.
Which James and I are jealous of as we're sitting here in Salt Lake City, Utah. So, so cool. Look down, right, description page where to find all of Jennifer's work and programs and all of that. But so we're really excited to have you here for this one because this is a conversation we've had a lot. And so as, right, people who have done some things in their marriage that are very disparaging. So I'll just speak from the I, right? So prostitution, a big part of my story, stealing money from the family business, been through church discipline a couple of times. So definitely want to own, I've done some messed up stuff as far as talking to the intimacy of our marriage and relationship. I describe it when I share my story, I didn't push over a fence. I dropped a nuclear bomb, right? Yeah. With Kayla. Yeah. And so, but we see a lot as people enter recovery that it's hard. And I know my circumstance is not the only circumstance that fits this, but where something happens in the relationship. So for a lot of our audience, it's acting out in some sexual behavior, cheating on a spouse, porn addiction, something like that. But how do you get a relationship back into balance? Because we see it on both sides where, the spouse is like, hey, you're fine, I've forgiven you. But the partner who has acted out is like, no, I'm always in a permanent one down, which I don't think is serving anyone. And I know there's been the reverse that it's like, hey, because you cheated on me, I am always in a one-up position in this relationship. Yep. And it's this thing that all of us out here have made some really big mistakes. It's part of I think the journey back to a healthy, connected relationship. And so we figured if anyone could help us just put the pieces together on that, it's going to be some JFF.
Awesome. I will try anyway. So take me to your question again. So did you want me to respond yet, or do you have another?
Yeah, no, just how do we get back to balance?
Well, a lot of times people think about it as if there's been a breach in the marriage or something deeply disruptive, like an affair or an infidelity, a deception or dishonesty, that there's some desire to kind of go back to what you had. And you can't ever really go back. I mean, because there's been a change in the relationship. And I would see it also in some ways as an exposure. And that is not to say that, you had to make the choices you made, but the limitations that exist in people often don't become evident to us until we start living our lives and making choices. And our mistakes expose our liabilities. They expose where we're blind to ourselves or to other people. And so when you are confronting a choice that you've made, it's really how does the couple make meaning of that? And do they use that to grow into stronger, better people, more capable of trust, more capable of love, more capable of intimacy? So it's extremely disruptive to one's sense of self, to one's sense of one's partner, to what the marriage is, because it exposes something you hadn't seen or didn't want to see. And so it's really unsettling, of course. But the couples that thrive are able to tolerate the exposures in it and grow into better people through it. So the couples that thrive are able to actually kind of create a cohesive narrative between them of what the meaning is of what happened and who they've become in the face of that. So it's the fact of their growth, their courage, their development. Either, it could be one is developing more than the other, of course, but there's something in that narrative that has a redemption in it and a strength in it. And that's the basis for the trust in the future.
So I love that. So help me, because maybe I'm a little bit slow on some of this, but so when you're talking about that exposure, like exposure to, because what I always fear is like I never at any point in time want to blame Kayla, right, my wife, for any of my behavior. I never want to be, and early, right, working with people early, they're like, well, if I had more sex in my marriage, and I'm like, look, there may have been problems in the marriage, but you didn't have to go do that. So tell me what you mean by like exposure, like exposing of, like we use infidelity as the example.
It's exposure of how the marriage was operating and or how people in the marriage were operating. So maybe it exposed your entitlement, or in the face of when you're not getting what you want, that you justify taking, you justify exploiting, you justify, doing what you want when you feel that you're, I'm just going to say what, like your narcissistic reinforcement. I'm not calling you narcissist, but I'm just saying, like this reinforcement of your sense of self wasn't getting fulfilled in the marriage, which a marriage never can fulfill, right? Okay.
Yes.
No, you're never going to honestly have somebody who just sits around and adores you all the time, except for my husband. No, just kidding. And you never are going to get it, any of us. Okay. So when you take that as like, a justification to go and get it elsewhere and to mask from your spouse, you're going and getting it elsewhere. Well, that exposes your character, exposes how your mind's operating. It probably exposes what you learned in your family of origin, right? And that's not to blame your parents either. I mean, what I mean is there's multiple factors that are shaping how you've put meaning together, but your choices, your behavior exposes those meanings. What are the meanings that you have created that have perhaps sustained your sense of self, but now the limitations in them are exposing themselves through the choices you've made? And sometimes people just want to be like, that was just a mistake and let's not talk about it anymore. Let's not think about it anymore. Like never going to happen again. And that might be true sometimes, but a lot of times it's like, I just don't want to deal with what I see about myself or my spouse. Let's bury it. And that actually makes people less able to glean from it the lessons about who they are so they can make wiser, clearer choices going forward.
So if I'm compulsively using pornography and I'm not sure why, how can I get down to this roots of what you're talking about, of understanding?
How can you expose?
Yeah, how can I expose that within me and understand what really is going to be that root problem within me then?
especially, in faith-based communities, there's so much fear of pornography that we're just trying to slap it down and say, don't do it, and stay away, as far away from it as you can. And we're so reactive to it that we have a hard time learning from it. Like if somebody's compulsively going to video games, there's a little bit more room to think about why. What's this person trying to solve? What is the thing that's not happening in their life or is happening in their life that drowning in video games is a better choice? Okay. Right. And so it allows you, when it's not so charged like pornography is, it just gives you a little more room. Or somebody has a food compulsivity or something, there can be all kinds of shame attached to it.
Yeah.
And sometimes to the detriment of looking at, why am I going to food? Or why am I going to video games? Or why am I going to porn? What am I trying to solve? What is it, the fear? Now, when you look to somebody to help you solve it and all they say is because you're a disgusting person, okay, well, that doesn't help so much, right? Or because you're just somebody who's so hedonistic and self-serving, that doesn't help very much. There's usually meanings. You need wiser sources of information sometimes to settle yourself down a bit and look at what is operating in this moment, that this is where I go.
That's so big.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you didn't catch everything that just happened the last 10 minutes, rewind because I feel like you've just dropped like 50 gems. Because I think there is a culture amongst the eyes, the addicts and people struggling. And I know it's we put it only on men. I know there are women who struggle too. We just had a couple episodes with female addicts. So no, I'm just speaking from the men because I am one and can only speak to my experience. But there's this, hey, if I can just eliminate that behavior. And you're right. There's some people who, because of cultural circumstances, like I would describe them as a dry drunk. Like I'm like, congratulations, you have locked yourself in a basement where there is no technology and you will never view porn. But I think what you said is so key. Like that exposure, they missed it.
Yes.
Like what the actual change or healing in the relationship could have been, they missed.
That's right. Exactly. So it's not a success to just not have access anymore. Or I see people who do that, they white knuckle and they say, okay, sex is not for me because I can't handle myself around it. But then they haven't grown into somebody who's free internally and who's capable of loving through their sexuality, who's capable of an intimate partnership. And when we make sex the problem, we kind of set people up to not grow into something richer and so much better. My son has told me, I can talk about this if it's helpful to people, but he in high school was just really starting to struggle with self-doubt and anxiety and kind of a perfectionism that was very internal. I wasn't tracking it because he would act a bit like he didn't care about things. Rather than I feel like I might not succeed. And so therefore I'm going to avoid it. And he was turning more and more to video games. And it was easy to want to see that as like, why are you being lazy? Why don't you care? Right. But he was trying to manage an anxiety within him. And so he was going to it way too much and getting more anxious and more depressed. Well, he got some help around it, some really valuable help. And a year later now, this kind of came to a head as the pandemic started for him. And he's just happy, comfortable in his own skin, making good relationships. And he plays video games sometimes, but it's not a place to go anymore. There's no need for him to go there because what he has in his life is so much better than that. And so if we had just said, you don't get to have the internet anymore, we are just shutting it all down, he would not only, probably he would have worked harder to still get it. Like, you're not taking it from me, I'm getting it. But also it wouldn't have healed and helped him grow into what he needed, which is to come to some resolution about himself and to be in better, more intimate connection with the people that are around him and that, his deeper friendship.
Totally. And we see people shift too, really quick. James, people shift. So I had one guy who said to me, he's like, oh, I used to be a total workaholic. I didn't have a porn problem, but I've solved my workaholic problem, and now I just view porn all the time. And I'm like, you just switch lanes, friend. The exposure that you're talking about didn't happen. And so often people shift lanes to where either culturally it's acceptable or their partner finds it acceptable. Because there's a lot of partners who say, hey, you can be a workaholic, that's fine, just don't look at porn. Or you can be compulsively eating to where it's damaging your health significantly, but just don't do this or that, and it just doesn't work.
That's right.
So I was going to ask you a little bit about, with the example that you gave of your son, the difference between then and now is ultimately he came to some sort of resolution within himself around who he was, who he wanted to be. He got some good help.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned he found meaningful connection outside of himself.
Yes.
Can you give any hot tips on how do I come to build some of that resolution within myself? What kind of internal work would I need to go on?
Well, I think, it's a good question. I mean, I think, for him, it was having a good, wise therapist that was helping him look at his relationship to himself and look at his relationship to some of the meanings that he was carrying about his life that were kind of high demand. And then he was rebelling against these high demand meanings and sort of working against himself. And so it was having somebody kind of help him think through these meanings and come to deeper integrity within himself. Like, who do I really want to be in the world? What do I want to make my God, so to speak? What is it that I want to kind of make my life be about through my choices? And so I think it in some ways started with a good connection. But it's also about having the courage to look at yourself. And to look at yourself with some honesty, but also, what's the way to say it? Like with some care and kindness to yourself around, I see what I'm doing. I want to do right by me. And I want to care about what this means about me and how I even feel about myself. Because sometimes we put this in what I'm doing to my spouse, what God thinks about it. Mm-hmm. As opposed to also like, is this the life I want to lead? I worked with a client who was going to all kinds of addiction recovery programs, and he would go into periods of nothing. And then he would just kind of flip the switch and go the other way and be looking 4 hours a day, putting his, job security at risk and things. But it was always in this comply and defy. It was sort of like, everybody else expects it of me. I'll do it so that I look like the good person. But then I'm angry about feeling controlled by everyone. So then I'll rebel against it. So he would always be in this kind of power struggle. And it wasn't until the focus came on who does he want to be? What does he really want for his life? What kind of man does he want to become? Like then the internal locus of control made a huge difference in getting out of this conflicted relationship to indulgence.
Yeah.
So therapy can do it, but wise input, I have this Art of Loving course for men where I'm really helping men to really think about.
Oh, we want to talk about that course. Don't you worry.
Okay, good.
But keep going.
But I do talk a lot about porn in that, like kind of what are the meanings that it is in your life? What is it? Why are you going to it? What is the meaning for you? What are you trying to solve? Just to help people have more self-reflective capacity with some of my input around kind of what those possibilities may be for them and where they might be able to go with it in a way that's healthier for them and not only creates more peace in their intimate relationships, but very, very importantly, more peace within oneself. Because you can't be in an intimate relationship with someone if you aren't fundamentally on some level at peace with yourself, that you let them know you, that you let them experience you, I think some of the most attractive, appealing men have a kind of comfort and solitude within themselves, right? Because they're at peace with who they are. And so they're easy to be close to.
So how do we make room for introspection and acceptance when porn is your coping mechanism, for example, and there's just too much fear and shame around that?
Well, you have to, yes. I mean, that's part of the problem. And that's one thing that I do in the course is I'm trying to just say, let's just step back for just a minute and just take a look at it. And let's look at why is it appealing and what's normal about that and completely legit about that. Okay. Right. And, for example, when I was a kid, 11 years old or something, my dad had a book on the top shelf of his office bookshelf called The Naked Communist. Okay. And it was a political book. I didn't know that, but I took my life in my hands to see if there were any naked pictures in there. So that just means I was normal. I mean, maybe some people listening will be like, no, that means you're clearly a pervert. I take that as, yeah, I had a natural curiosity about sexuality. Now I felt, like I didn't want my parents to know I'm climbing there to see what there's, and there were no pictures of naked communists inside, just words. But, a lot of times if we can just step back a minute and say, this is not a corrupt part of you. This is a natural and human part of you that you're drawn to sexuality. And particularly for men, I think sexual gaze is especially powerful. I think it's a part of testosterone and a part of, and there's even a spirituality in it, which I know sounds really kind of sacrilegious when I say that, but there's certainly this appreciation of femininity, of feminine beauty is a wonderful part of masculinity. And I'm not saying that means looking at porn 4 hours a day is good for anybody. But there is an element of it that is good and right and contributes to the good life. So to just kind of normalize what's happening, but then seeing when it becomes corrupt in the sense that it's working against you, so working against what you want to create in your life, you just have to, the question's a good one, because if you've only heard these shaming messages, it's really unhelpful. And that's a lot of times when people hear me say that, they think I'm in favor of pornography, and that's not it. Like, can we see what's happening enough that we can get in the driver's seat?
Totally.
It's a lot like with food. I think there's a lot of parallels between sexual compulsivity and food compulsivity. Women tend to have more food-related struggles, and men more sexuality-related struggles around the compulsivity is what I mean anyway. Mm-hmm. And they're both like of the body. They're both about creating moderation. They're about managing the issues of pleasure and self-respect. So you can't just swear them off. You can't just say, I'm just turning, a lot of people try to turn off sexuality or turn off food, but it doesn't go well. And so, it's easier sometimes when I talk to people about this idea that if you just grew up in an environment where just the fact that you like sweets or that you want cake or something makes you a deformed or in some way defective person, that is not going to increase your ability to make wise choices around that pleasure. That only makes you go into either full anorexia or repression or, bulimia or, indulgence, sexual indulgence. So this messaging interferes with a process of discerning, how do I integrate this pleasure and joy in my life in a way that blesses my life, that makes it richer? You have to come to wise moderation. And by moderation, I don't mean neutral and boring. I mean like it's integrated.
Balance. Yeah. Harmony.
Yeah. A balance. Exactly. In your life around these pleasures, if you're really going to have joy. And so it is a spiritual process. So in some ways, what I'm trying to say is normalizing it doesn't mean you're broken. It means there's a process that you can engage in to get more anchored into your integrity and your self-respect. You can create a relationship to the pleasures in life that make your life richer, stronger, and better.
Yeah. And it was interesting because when you talked about that gaze, right? And I think, like you say, I think maybe people listening would move right past that and be like, did she say she's pro porn? Like, no, but so I've been thinking a lot, like doing some more meditation and stuff. We talk about, if you go a little Eastern yin yang, right? Masculine, feminine energy, which is not gender related. They just use those words. Right. That part of the masculine energy is to just witness, to be still, to just, and so that gaze, right? The power of gaze and eye contact and seeing someone in a slow, I see you, James, although obviously this is a podcast, like I see you, Jennifer, and just to see you as you talk and to witness you, that creates a different level of intimacy in our conversation than if you and I were just on the phone. And so I think that's so powerful. The shifting of that, it's the whole perspective shift, right? And because oftentimes, like you say, it's about behavior, right? Like, can we get you to do the right behavior? Because if you do, which that's not all bad, it just, I understand the end game is if people are doing good behavior, they'll be happy and live good lives, and but the how it really messes with the how in there. And so the question I had with this exposure is, so if I'm listening, right, and I'm hearing you right now, and I'm like, oh, like this is what this is all about, and I'm struggling with, grandiosity, narcissism, where like I'm in my exposure. How do I bring my partner into my process of, hey, I've got exposure going on? Because I thought it was interesting when you said, right, we comply and then defy. So I have a saying from my friend Magic Mark, that there's no such thing as resistance, just lack of safety.
I have to think about what that means. Okay, there's no such thing as resistance.
So I'm not resistant. The only reason is because I'm not safe. So I think about it, right, when I have clients come in and they don't want to share their whole story with me. They don't want to say all the things. It's like, well, because it's not safe enough. But once it gets safe enough, they'll say all the things. And one of the greatest ways to not be safe is compliance, right? Like if I just say, okay, well, whatever you want me to do, Jennifer, I'll do that. Then that's a way for me to stay safe, because I'll just do whatever you're telling me to do. But then to your point, it's going to come out sideways with me later, between us, whatever. And so if I'm worried about that safety, because if I go tell my spouse, hey, I've got this exposure that I'm a total tool about some of my stuff, because there's a part of that that's just real. Anyone struggling with compulsive behavior, like totally, to your point, using me as an example, there was a part of me that's like, I will just control and force to get my needs met, and I won't care about anyone else. As I was acting out, there's totally a huge part of that I'm like, nope, other people don't have feelings and I don't care because it's about me. And so how do I bring that to a spouse or a partner who has been damaged by that? How do I keep the safety and do the exposure all at the same time?
So first of all, I would say there's nothing that makes your spouse safer than your honesty.
Ooh, that's real.
That's the truth. Yep.
If you don't know, now you know.
Because that may not make them like you. It may not make them trust you. Okay, because you're saying, I'm not trustworthy. Right? That's what a lot of us would say if we're being really honest, is I am not trustworthy. Trusting me is a bad idea at this point. I want to become a trustworthy person, but I don't have that now. That is horrible as that feels and unsafe as it feels. It's actually the safest moment in the marriage so far. Right? If that's been something that has been being hidden. Because oftentimes in marriages, there's a kind of a collusion in, okay, trust the untrustworthy. If you're the spouse that wants to trust the person who's dishonest, let's just put it in the gender typical frame right now around this issue, just like, well, I'm just going to turn a blind eye because I want so much to trust my husband. That's fundamentally unsafe and it's unwise because you're in a collusive pretense, and that keeps both people from growing. I often think about the work I do is I'm more of a surgeon than I am a nurse, which is, okay, it's like the marriage is dysmorphic. There's been too much dishonesty in it and collusion in dishonesty. And I can say more what I mean by collusion. So it's growing in these dysmorphic ways, and it's unhealthy. It's limiting what it can do, because, the hips aren't aligned. And so it can't walk and climb mountains. So I come in and I with honesty, break the bones and it hurts. And it feels like I have no anesthesia either for this process. And it hurts. And it does hurt, because then you're sort of facing this is something I've not wanted to see, or I've been able to be blind to, not willfully or out of some, but more just I've been able to kind of hide from something. but it's been hurting me. And so when there's more honesty, then there's a chance to grow in the right way, to grow in stronger ways. So you don't want to manage. Sometimes we confuse the word safety with feeling safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the wrong idea, because if you're waiting to feel safe in life, you'll wait a very, very long time.
Yes.
Because to live is to kind of tolerate risk and uncertainty. And so
I would say the more risk you can take in, the more you can grow, the more you can live.
Yes, exactly. The more you can thrive. And then the safer you ultimately get, because the roadmap you're operating with is an accurate one. So if you want to be safe, you want to know where the potholes are. You want to know where the dangerous parts of town are. And if you stay blind, then, I'm walking around a new town here. So, you get your map and you're kind of knowing where are good places to go. The more accurate, the more helpful for living a good life. But when we're afraid to know things about ourselves, about our partner, about life, and we're like, I want this to be Disneyland. I don't care where I am. I want it to be what I want it to be. We can do that instinctively without even knowing we're lying to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's unsafe, because we are imagining we're in one territory when in fact we're in another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So speak more to that collusion, because that is a big thing.
Right. Well, the collusion is, I want what I want, and I want to imagine that. Well, let me just do it from maybe the typical feminine version of this, which is, a lot of times people will rush into marriage in part because they don't want to necessarily know who they're marrying. They just want that person to be what they've projected onto that person. And this is a mutual process usually for people when they get married. It's like, you seem everything. I'm reflecting back what an amazing person you are. You're reflecting that back to me. Let's lock this in before either of us knows too much. Okay. And what that collusion is, I think a bit is, I want to believe that you're going to be this person who will love me and accept me and make my life good.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want so much for that to be true that I don't want to really, really know who you are, and ask myself the question of, am I prepared to really love you? I want to be loved, and I want to imagine you're the perfect provider of love, but I don't want to necessarily be awake to you and your limitations. And so I think, especially if we've been socialized into the idea, and again, I'll just do it from the feminine version of, like, if you marry well, he's going to caretake you and manage your sense of safety in the world, and and give you a life and happiness. Well, then you want to kind of imagine he's the prince, and I don't want to know too much. And you might be anxious about things in the world, and you may feel insecure, but I don't really want to know that much, because I want to imagine you're who I want you to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of the going blind. And then often the masculine is like, well, I want to be the strong provider of strength and capacity. But why doesn't she admire me more? And why doesn't she appreciate me more? And I resent that. So I'm going to still kind of hide the vulnerability I feel and the uncertainty and the anger. But I'll keep giving her a picture that I think she wants. But I resent in some ways the way I feel used in this way. And so I can go and justify other things for myself.
Right. Because the picture's not real.
That's the collusion. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, just the picture's not real. And so there's a picture painted there that is not what a human being looks like or is. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm the other partner attempting to fit that picture, that is not real. I mean, I remember I was in a group with Miss Courtney, who we had on a couple podcasts ago. And I remember she looked at me and she's like, I am so sad for you that you thought perfection was real. Like, that you got taught that Prince image was something that you should chase, Stephen. And it just, it blew me up, because, if I was being honest in that moment, I based my whole life on that if I'm Prince enough. And so there's this dance, I think. You said that so beautifully. Yeah, and exactly. And we, I don't blame us for wanting Disneyland. I don't blame us for wanting a world free of suffering and limitation. I mean, it's certainly natural to want it and to imagine, we can have it.
And I'm not here to say that you can't have a life that has a lot of joy in it and a lot of strength in it and a lot of rich meaning. But the path is not perfectionism. That's a denial of what the human experience really is.
Say that again.
Yeah. The perfectionism is to deny what the human experience really is. Perfectionism, in my opinion, is anti-spiritual. Yeah.
Just mic drops.
Yeah,
just mic drops.
Just bombs. Yep.
If you don't know, now you know. Rewind that. 3 minutes. You're welcome.
Yep.
So, Jennifer, I know that I'm switching gears just slightly on this, but you had brought up the integration that needs to happen, and I know that is part of your the Art of Loving course that you're doing right now.
Yes.
And I had a couple of friends take that course and found that part of the course was really an eye-opener for them. Can you just expand on that just a little bit more about,
sure,
because you touched on it.
Yeah.
Can you just open up on that a little more?
I mean, I think the sort of the overarching way that I think about this is that I also have a How to Talk to Your Kids About Sex course, that the goal is to help your kids have sexual integrity. And what I mean by that is how to basically integrate your God-given sexuality. Right. So a lot of us have this idea like, well, to be good, you have to be at arm's length with your sexuality, as opposed to sexuality is a gift. It's a beautiful part of being human. And but it's a vulnerable part of being human. And I think when we're young, we think of it as either you're good and dutiful or you're bad and have pleasure. I mean, I think that's kind of an early interpretation of sexuality and pleasure and goodness. So to be strong, you can't be a house divided. You have to basically be able to accept that sexuality is part of being human. It is a part of like rejecting the perfectionism frame, is to integrate sexuality, is to say to be human is to be sentient, alive, imperfect, flawed, and also have this strange thing of sexuality. So to come to terms with what it is to be human is its own spiritual development, in my opinion, and doesn't happen easily. But you can have messaging that actually interferes with that process. So even though that's an unfolding process, in the most ideal situation, it still takes time to come to peace with your embodiment and who you are as a flawed human being. That we are often giving messages that corrupt that process, like sexuality is scary and sex is stronger than you are, and watch out. And if you have these feelings, there's something wrong with you, as opposed to if you have these feelings, there's something right about you. And so the goal of this course is, how do you come to terms with accepting this part of your embodiment? But part of what facilitates that integration is also living up to your highest values around it. And I don't mean this in a perfectionistic way. I mean this in, how do I relate to my sexuality in a way that creates joy and goodness in my life, and joy and goodness in the lives of people that I care about? Right. So what does it mean about how I relate to this? Similar to food. How do I relate to pleasure in food, or how do I relate to the sensuality of food in a way that creates joy and strength in my life? Because then it gets it off of I can't, I shouldn't, and more like, what am I aiming for? I want to be in a healthy relationship to, let's say, food, to my body. I want to nourish it. I also want to have pleasure. I want to do that in a way that makes me a stronger, happier person, not in a way that undermines my peace with myself. So the living up to your higher values is, what is it that I'm shooting towards? And with sexuality, it's like, if I want to be capable of loving through my sexuality, and I want to be capable of a deep, rich relationship, is what I'm choosing right now getting me closer to that goal or farther from that goal? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't get into this sort of struggle. I shouldn't touch myself. I shouldn't think this. I shouldn't feel that. More like, okay, what is it that I want? And is this facilitating me arriving there or not?
Yeah.
And so that integration, when you feel like you're the chooser and you are coming to the ability to accept what it is to be human, and you're in a more creative agency-based process. Well, you're not in power struggles with yourself and with these messages. You've got all the wheels pointing in the right direction then. And then you're more like, okay, is this really what I want? And if I don't want that for myself, what do I want? So when you feel like it's within you, this is what happened for my son. Like, do I really want a life where I'm in the basement on video games? Okay, and no, I don't. But that means I have to face things that feel scary for me. I have to confront my perfectionism. I have to kind of tolerate letting myself be human and letting myself be exposed to myself, even as flawed. So it's like, but I would rather do that than do this other thing to myself. And so, it's like once he kind of got it from rebelling against being pressured, and more into who do I want to be, that's when everything came together for him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so, that's it. Like, I don't know how else to say it than just like that's the, because I believe all truth kind of fits together wherever you find it. And I'm like, that's pretty pure, unadulterated if you're listening. So hold on to that. So how do I, like, if I'm day one, so I'm thinking of myself, 7 years ago, 6 years ago. And if I'm shifting my mindset on my, unwanted sexual behavior, whatever it is, the bad things that I've done or the misaligned things. And I'm trying to bounce between how everyone talks about it and how we've defined right now how we should talk about it. so catching everyone. Sure. But so that stuff, how do I start the conversation with my partner, right? So how do I say to, my Christian wife, hey, I totally believe in like this stuff I've done cheating on you is wrong. And there's this exposure, self-accept, there's this growth that I want to be a part of. How do I have that conversation if I'm early in this process with my partner?
So I would say you don't want to be insensitive to your partner, of course. Okay. You don't want to use truth as a weapon. Some people do that, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to be clear about what you're in fact doing. But again, one of the kindest things you can do to facilitate your spouse's safety is just start showing them who you are at this point in time. Mm-hmm. And that is a kind of intimacy that doesn't feel good to either person, but it is intimate. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I see people start trusting their spouse, it's strange because it's often when the darkest thing has just been revealed. Mm-hmm. And you see like the spouse starts to settle down because she's like, and her respect for her husband goes up because she starts to see like, he's courageous. He's not screwing around anymore. He's going to be straight with me. And even though I don't necessarily like what he's saying, it's like the paradox, like, I can't believe what you're saying. And I'm so relieved you're saying it. And a lot of times people are in that paradox, like, I want to get away from you. And yet I also feel more compelled and hopeful in a way that I haven't before. Because something more honest is emerging.
Don't you think that there's part of that they knew there was dishonesty? Because so often we hear from partners like, I knew I was doing the Disneyland Prince thing, and I knew it wasn't all real. The collusion part, they kind of know.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. So it's also like, I'm not crazy. Because sometimes they know, but then they're like, they want to believe that they're wrong. And so they kind of are like, okay, I'm just one of those anxious, paranoid types. And they kind of feel crazy, but they kind of prefer crazy to really dealing with what's in front of them. When what's in front of them emerges, there's a kind of anger, like, how come you've been lying to me? But a relief about I can track reality, and a relief that this person seems to be taking himself on. When I see people start to self-confront, they're not worried so much at that point about whether or not they may care about the impact on their spouse, but they're not trying to manage the view of themselves in their spouse's eyes. Mm-hmm. They have let go of how anybody else feels about this. Like when you James, are just saying like, okay, here's who I am. This is what I've done. That's a person who's no longer pretending, right? And I don't mean to say you have no places in your life where you pretend. I'm just saying that you're cleaner and clearer and more honest. And that makes you a more trustworthy person when you're not going to when you don't screw with the truth. And when you're willing to allow what's true to be more important than how you're seen. And so when you're saying, how do you do this? I think it's the biggest thing is the only way I'm going to find my strength is to put how I'm seen on the altar and talk as honestly as I can to myself, to God, to my partner. That is what sets you free. My favorite scripture is the truth sets you free. And when I was a young person, the thing I'm probably most grateful to my younger self for having done was I made a commitment that I would be as honest with myself as I could be when I was up against unhappiness within myself or with other people. Like, who am I in this? What is my role in this? And that doesn't keep you from any vulnerability, but it does allow you to have less vulnerability around who you are. It does allow you to become a more trustworthy person. I mean, for your spouse, we always do things in marriage that can hurt our spouse's feelings or that undermine their happiness. But when you're partnered with somebody who will yield to what is true, right, rather than how they're seen, that can make a marriage.
Well,
because then you can keep self-correcting. You trust your spouse not to be perfect. You trust your spouse to be honest.
Well, and you trust yourself as a person. It's just deeply accountable in the choices that you're going to make and why you made them. That's huge. There's no you don't move to shame and blame anymore. You're just owning yourself and your thoughts and your actions.
Totally. And I've often shared with men who have not disclosed, right, the truth about what's going on with them. I'm like, look, there's a real simple difference. When you go home and your wife says, hey, I love you, or you have a sexual experience, or you're eating dinner together, or whatever level of intimacy, you will always have the question and the shame. If she knew, would she really? And I said, look,
that's
the
right.
difference between me and you is I may go home and she may still be pissed, or something might still be off, but at least I know when she says, hey, I love you, or let's be intimate, or do dinner together, or whatever, I can take that in because I know she knows the whole thing. And
definitely. And so much of being able to receive love from others, I mean, paradoxically, is to feel lovable. And I don't mean perfect or without flaw, or that it isn't a gift that someone loves you, because they certainly don't have to love you. Right. But to say, like, I don't think they're making it on false, assumptions. Mm-hmm. And they do know who I am and they still love me. It makes it all the more precious, but also receivable. Mm-hmm.
So if I'm the partner in the collusion side of this, that I've tried to create Disneyland and I've tried to, have my partner fit that prince or princess role, and I'm on that side of it, that I'm saying I don't have some big skeleton in the closet that I need to disclose, but I want this to now enter my marriage. So switching seats to that partner, how would you approach that conversation with someone who's, your gut is telling you, or they may have partially disclosed and gaslighted a whole bunch of stuff.
I think
how do I enter that?
Would say is, so again, you're entering into a very honest conversation. It's not like I know and I'm going to, take you down. It's like, I'm going to be unflinchingly honest. I don't trust you. I don't know the contours of that distrust because I feel like you keep so much of who you are from me. But one thing I can't get away from is that I do not trust you. And I keep thinking I should pretend like I do for myself, for you. But I can't keep living dishonestly like this. Here's the truth. I don't trust you. Can you help me understand why I don't?
That's just straight down to the heart of it, right?
Dude, as someone who, to be honest, Jennifer, someone who is like fierce honesty has been a track of mine for several years, of even the little things, I feel like this call to like double down on like my truth and honesty. Like I don't have some giant skeleton in the closet anymore, but as we've been talking about this, and the reason I'm saying this is the free that you're talking about. Like I have a lot of freedom from my sexual addiction that people are in process working on, no judgment, whatever. But even with that piece, that elephant in the room, that big thing, not in my marriage anymore, in my life. I mean, you can read my story on the internet everywhere.
Yeah.
I still I feel this deep calling to what you're saying. And what that tells me is there's a truth and a beauty here that I hope everyone listening is seeing. To live out of that level of authenticity, to let someone love you at that level. I think you said it right on. It is spiritual. That is a spiritual journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the part they edited out was, in the truth shall set you free, is the truth will drive you to your knees and it will hurt. Then it will set you free.
Yeah.
So it's we avoid the truth because it pressures our growth. It makes us confront what is real, which can be so sobering. But that's where something strong and beautiful can grow. And it is worth it. That is where the freedom and the joy and the beauty lies. But you have to give up the superficial. You have to give up the control over how you might be seen or not seen. You have to give up your arrogance in a way. And I don't mean that just in a simple-minded way. I mean it I'm thinking about myself. I want the world to be this way. I don't want to deal with that part of me.
Yeah.
And so, but that's an act of faith to be willing to submit to what is true. And then you have fertile ground in which to create something better, more beautiful, more worthy, stronger.
Yeah.
And so it is absolutely, what's the word? It's what is the word? It's just this true north. It's that is the thing to anchor to. It's the thing that will make your life stronger. But up front, you'll feel so weak. That's what's the paradox, is when people are self-confronting and being really honest, I have so much respect for them. It's inspiring to me, the moral courage in it.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time that they're I am full of crap. So they're I am so, they feel humbled to the core. And yet it's their most courageous, beautiful reality. And, just a place they can grow from. But that's what true strength is to be willing to submit to what's true.
Yeah. Well, and as you enter that life, the other thing I think that got edited out in that scripture was, ain't everybody going to stay with you? And ain't everybody want to go? Because I have lost friends. I have had change in some family relationships. I have had things happen because it's not a, hey, I'm right or I'm better. I'm using air quotes.
No.
And it's that people at different times. I know earlier in my life, I had two sisters sitting at my wedding that knew I had stuff under the surface. And to your point, they didn't know the contours of what that was, but they're I wonder how this is going to go for him. And I wasn't ready to see it. So no judgment on anyone, but a PS to that scripture is probably everyone's not going to stay with you, because there are people, as you step into that authenticity, right, to use our word, unashamed, right, as you be unashamed, or, really go to that true north, there are people who aren't ready to step out of their collusion. So they're going to distance themselves from you because it's too overwhelming for them.
Absolutely. No question. Yeah, and that's the other scary part of it, is I think people sometimes think, if I do get more honest, if I do get stronger, the woman asking that question, I don't trust you. I mean, there's enormous courage in that, because first of all, my view of myself and this marriage is about to blow up. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's no guarantee that my spouse is going to confront himself or become stronger or join me in creating something better. Mm-hmm. I mean, the chances have gone up if you're going to show that kind of moral courage and really stand up for it. But there is no guarantee. And so the load on somebody to really take that step out into the dark, I mean, that's why faith is a virtue, is you're daring to go towards what's true without the guarantee that the people that matter most to you will join you or grow themselves. There's no guarantee, but it's the only way to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in hopes to stand in truth, I'm going to challenge James and I to something right here with you, Jennifer, and you're welcome to join us if you would like, but I won't put you on the spot. James, sure. We have been called out by JFF to live in authenticity and truth, and to quit messing around and get closer to true north. So what is a truth that you need to own, and myself as well? Let's name one right now. Let's take the courage, let's be unashamed, and step into a collusion that you are living in.
A collusion that I'm living in. I'll let you take the lead on that, Steve, since that's such a brilliant idea. Go ahead and why don't you name one?
Yeah. So a collusion, I think that is still sitting with me, because it comes up all the time, Jennifer, for me, that it's real. Is that because I am young in my career, so I got licensed in August as a therapist. Because I'm young in my career, and because I don't have years of sobriety in addiction recovery, the collusion I have with myself is don't share that information, hide it, cover it up, because then I cannot be this image, this prince, to use our analogy, of someone who can actually help people. Because in my heart, I know God has called me this place. Like, I know I am capable of helping people. And I've seen it in my work that I'm like, no, I have something to offer in this capacity in place. But the collusion I have is, like, I kind of have some shame around my story. Like, I kind of want to bury my head in the sand, fast forward 3 years, and be like, I've got the L behind my name. I'm X years sober. Still in don't have my full blessings back in the church. So rebaptized in February. That's a truth I want to step into and own, of some insecurity and humanness for me, that I want to do it perfect and be perfect for everyone. Because I believe if I do that for everyone, then they'll want me.
Yeah.
And not even like the money will I have clients part of it. Like, emotionally, that I will be accepted.
Right.
Totally in collusion.
Yeah. That's good.
All right.
Mr. Wilhite?
My turn. Well, you call me out on my collusion. You see it all the time, and you call BS on it. And for me, it's just that I have nothing to offer. I might be, so the one that comes to my mind is that, you're useful, but you're not essential. Right. And so it's this double-edged sword of like, oh, well, you're helpful enough that people kind of would like to have you around, but you're always disposable. And right at the core, I would speak to, that's probably around some abandonment issues or whatever, right? If you want to go to attachment theory or whatever. But at its core, I'm still working on the shame of I'm just not enough and never will be. So I'm not essential in my own life or in anybody else's life, that I'm just not enough. And I'm not gonna, right at the core, that's probably what it is, just not enoughness. And so stepping into that, I got to work on how is that then, if I'm going to speak in Jennifer language, how is that serving me and why? And how can I have more integrity around playing? Why am I playing small or taking that one down position with myself all the time?
Right.
Or most of the time in
This
most
is
scenarios.
why I think you keep sexually acting out. Why you don't have years of sobriety. Because then you'd have to own a larger story that you're someone who's overcome.
Yeah. And just something I think with some of my clients and with myself in this same frame is there's something about saying I'm weak or I'm not enough that just kind of, at least for me, is like a way of getting myself off the hook to this larger responsibility, or to go do, or to kind of, it looks humble. It looks like safer to kind of step back so it can look good, because to be self-debasing looks better than self-aggrandizing. but it's also a way of sidestepping the moral responsibility to step out and take a risk, or to grow into your capacity, to own the fact that you have impact on other people, whether or not you're going to acknowledge you do. And you have something to offer them if you're courageous, whether or not you're going to acknowledge you do. So it's like a way of, I don't know for you, James, what it is, but I think it can be a way of like letting yourself off the hook in the name of humility, or I just don't have that much self-confidence, and trying to get out of the moral conversation that we're all in, whether or not we want to be in it.
Well, it's faithless, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is. And it's safe. It's safe. And a lot of times when people play small, I think it's trying to find a safety that doesn't exist because it has moral impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In our LDS culture, I call it the Honda Accord ego. Because I drive a Honda Accord because I'm humble. It's a choice that I make because I don't need the flashy things. I can just sit in the back row and fold the chairs and serve because I am humble.
Yeah.
Which right. I'm like, that's as big of an ego as the guy who leverages himself to the hilt to buy a Benz. Like, it's an image management. So
yeah, I think that what you're saying is I kind of have a certain amount of my identity or of my flaws that I'm willing to put out there, but then maybe it gets static and there's a way in which it can become like its own story that steps away from what's true. And I don't mean to say that in a public position, you have to always be revealing everything about yourself, but how much am I going back to this image as opposed to staying human and real and allowing myself to be knowable even to myself? I think that's just like an ongoing challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I'm just thinking about which self-confrontation I want to talk about.
Well, let's give some props to JFF being real on the spot.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what you think after I say it. I'm just thinking about, last night my husband and I were having a conversation about, he was saying, I don't know if it's such a virtue in himself, because I was just saying, you've been an easy person for me to trust. We were just kind of reflecting back on when we met and fell in love with each other and so on. And, I said, it's just been an easy person for me to be real with and an easy person for me to be honest with. And that's true. He absolutely has been. But I think that what was also becoming evident in that conversation, this is not such a new idea, but I think I was thinking about it a little bit different way, is that John's tendency is to his first impulse is to think it's my fault, or I'm the one who has erred here, and kind of take on more responsibility than what is his in a situation. That's his first inclination. And I have become better at this, but I know I can still take advantage of that. Like, I can be upset with him and then know that I get the upper hand because he'll quickly want me to not be upset with him, and then take on more than is really his responsibility. And, while I, in the face of that, would say, no, don't do that. I know what's mine and don't take it on. But I know in myself that I can instinctively, in a moment of my own dysregulation or whatever, give off energy and dysregulation that I know he'll go and start picking it up. And I like that. So I'm just owning, what I was thinking about last night is I like that, and I do that still, and it's not fair to him.
No, that's so tender. I'm real. Totally real. And then now I'm like, all the ways I'm taking advantage of Kayla in like moments where I go in there. So tell us, where do they find you? Where do they find the Art of Loving course?
Sure. So my website, which is just my last name, Finlayson-Fife.com. And on there's a podcast archive, so you can listen to more podcasts where there's topics. You can even look it up by different topics. But then I have 5 courses, and one of them is the men's self and sexual development course. I have a parallel women's course. The men's course is the Art of Loving. The women's course is the Art of Desire. But The Art of Loving is right there under the courses tab, online courses. And so you can do this as a self-paced course. And you then have office hours with me. There's also a Facebook group with a lot of awesome men on there that have gone through these principles, have had their marriages and things, really their relationship to themselves and their sexuality evolving, and they're great support to other men as well. So just super impressed with a lot of these men and the kind of courage they have. So anyway, you can find the course there, and it's like, I don't know, it's like at least 19 hours of content, but it's awesome. I mean, I'm quite proud of it actually, because, you know.
Thank you for not playing small. Own it. Legit.
Yeah, I think for a while I was like, well, how can a woman be talking to men about sexuality? But I love a man, and I'm grateful for his sexuality. And masculine sexuality is such a wonderful thing and such a gift, and it can be anyway. And so I think, at least from my experience and my working with men, kind of what can I offer in terms of really thinking through who you are in relationship to yourself, to your integrity, to your partner, and to your sexuality, and how to make that more honest and more trustworthy, and also more of a source of strength and beauty in your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jennifer, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining us and dropping it was raining
huge
nuggets of
bombs.
Wisdom. Truth bombs. So thank you so much for taking some of your time to share it here with us. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure too. Really enjoyed it.
So if you have enjoyed listening, we always invite you to give us 5 stars on iTunes. That is how the world finds us and decides whether or not we are worth listening to. If you're looking for scholarships, help for anything that you need in recovery, you can go to unashamedunafraid.com/scholarships. If you would like to donate and become an outsider to the bonus content and all the things we're doing there and helping fund scholarships, as we are a nonprofit 501c3, you can go to unashamedunafraid.com/donate and follow us on social at unashamedunafraid. And until we are with you next time, what I invite you to do with your unashamed is, as James, I, and Jennifer have done here, to step into some real truth and some of your collusion and be unashamed.